Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman, and I am the streamer for this stream. And we work on a Django project that I've got going, and we're going to continue on that project tonight. But we're going to do something a little different from the typical Django development stuff that is my normal fare. And hopefully you learn something along the way and gain some knowledge about adding tooling, because that's where we are going to be our focus tonight. Before I get too far into things, there's plenty of ways you can keep up with me if you're not watching the stream, or if you're catching this on YouTube. There's a link above that will take you to a mailing list and all sorts of ways you can keep in touch with me. I write a lot of articles about Python and Django and that sort of thing. And there is a Discord below. So if you want to chat and have some long-form discussion about something about Django, you're welcome to join the Discord that is linked in the Twitch page, and you can find me there as well. I'm also on Twitter and GitHub as MB Lehman, and I'm on Patreon as MB Lehman as well. So if you are watching this and you find it useful enough to throw a few dollars my way, I'd be totally grateful. I do want to thank my patrons, Rupert, Abdulaziz, Patrick, Mark, and Eric. Your contributions help me cover costs of the stuff that I do for the Django community, so I'm really grateful for what you do there. So what are we going to do tonight? We're going to focus on a tool called Bandit, and I'm kind of at this lull in the development work that I need to do, as my spouse, who's my customer for my project, is starting to use the application and still figuring out the things that are important to her. So while I'm waiting for more input from her and feedback, I have an opportunity to add some extra stuff to make the project a little bit more robust. So I thought it would be good to add some security checking. I have a set of tools that do some various static analysis, and we're going to add this one tonight that is a different kind of static analysis that can report on if there are known security exploits and bad code that I've written, kind of keeping me honest. It's not a perfect tool, but it's a better than nothing kind of tool. So the tool is called Bandit, and I believe it comes out of the OpenStack project, is where it originated from. It has since moved to a different organization within the Python community. But what it does is it runs through your code and builds an abstract syntax tree, and then does analysis on that tree to make sure that it's not doing dumb things, I guess is the short version. And where I'm going to integrate this is with my Precommit tool, which you can see from this issue. So Precommit is a tool that I use that every time I commit with GitHub, this pre-commit framework will fire off a variety of hooks to check the quality of my code. And so the mission that we have to start is to set up pre-commit to use Bandit and to execute it. And then I need to run Bandit against all of my existing code and see if there's anything already that it would report. And if there is, we need to fix them before I can actually commit that stuff, because I want to have a code base that is like clean from the start, and that way anytime I check in new changes, it's only checking new files and can keep me honest about what is going good and poorly in my app. So that's the plan. And if you're new to Precommit, I'll walk you through the file that is used, and we're going to have to walk through some of the Bandit configuration together. I use Bandit at my job, and there is a configuration file, but the file that I use for work is pretty tailored to run a subset of the Bandit checks. I ideally would like to run them all for what I'm doing on this project. So I'm hoping I can get away with like no configuration, and just I'm guessing the Bandit default is to try and run everything. And if we discover that there's some overly specific rules that I don't really care about, then we can look to opt out of some of those things if we need to. So that's the overall goal. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me anything about Python, Django, or web development. That's kind of what I'm generally here for. And so this is a bit of a different topic, but I think it's still one that you could apply to basically any web project you might have. Bandit would be a good tool for that. And I think Bandit might also be good for security stuff in general that doesn't necessarily have to do with web stuff. So it's good to know about. So let's take a look at it. I've got the Bandit documentation loaded up here. The first page is not got a lot to it. It tells you basically what I told you, that it builds the AST and scans it and then gives you a report. So we need to jump to the configuration section to figure out what we need to do here. And I also brought up the actual repository because they did have this section about using Precommit. And so I think what I really need to do is add this stuff right here. So Precommit, is the tool that I use, and it has a configuration file, which I went ahead and brought up before the stream started, and you can see it here. So my repository, whenever I do a commit, will run all of the code that I'm changing through 3 tools currently. It'll run it through Black and iSort and Flake8 to kind of do quality checks on it. So Black does code formatting, iSort does your import sorting. So if you want your imports in a certain way, iSort does that. And Flake8 does style checking to check against the PEP8 tool, or the PEP8 Python enhancement proposal, I should say. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new section after Flake8, because I'm going to make sure that the Bandit runs last. And I guess the order doesn't really matter, but I think it's not the fastest tool in the world, so it seems reasonable to put it at the end. And that way, sometimes if I run these tools and I see Precommit fail, I can kind of Control-C to kill Precommit, and then modify stuff as I need to so that I don't waste time on hooks that are later on. So we'll drop it in here. And first thing I'm going to do is reformat the thing because it doesn't match what my others look like. And you give it the repository URL, and we have to give it a revision. So that's a good question of what the revision that it bases on is based on a tag, I believe. So let's see what tags are available here. Looks like the latest is 1.6.2, and that seems as good as any to me. Let's check PyPI, see what Bandit is published on PyPI. Hopefully it's 1.6.2. There we go. Okay, it was last published a while ago at this point, in July of last year. So we can come in here and change the rev to 1.6.2, and now that will give us access to Bandit. So I've got Precommit already as a tool here, and we can run the command, give it a -h. And the thing that we need to do is do Precommit run in order to run against all of the files already. So we'll do Precommit run, and we'll see the help on that one. And so this is a single hook that it's going to run, and there's the -- all files option. Oh, I didn't know you could do -a, so that's cool. So I think we give it the hook name, so it should look like this: Precommit run -a Bandit. And since it's the first time I'm using Bandit, it has to do a clone of that, and it's going to pull from that tag version, that 1.6.2 version. And so I don't know how long this is going to take. I don't know what Bandit's going to run against. Presumably, it's going to run against the standard configuration. So maybe while that is going, whoop, it's already done. Cool. Okay, there's one that we're immediately going to have to disable. So, or filter out certain files. What's it complaining about? There's a lot of these, and because this code base is not huge, that actually ran fairly quickly. But I think it's going to complain about every single assert. So what it's trying to say is that assert, if it can be optimized out. So it can be a security vulnerability, I guess, if you had guards in your code checking for certain conditions, and then your code was put through a Python version that did not use the base level set, it had the optimization set higher. If you set the optimization level higher in Python, Python will actually strip out the asserts. And that's what Bandit is trying to tell us about. And in fact, this is kind of cool. I guess I haven't actually looked at these, so I don't know what this is going to say, but it might give us an explanation for why. Yeah, here we go. It's basically what I just told you. Assert is removed when you're compiling with -o. And so this can cause some problems. In my use case, though, the only place that I ever use assert is in my test code. So the question is, so I've got two options here. I can either say, hey, ignore assert, ignore B101, because I'm never going to run my code through an optimized version, which is most likely what I'm going to do. Or I can configure Bandit to ignore all of my test files. And yeah, I think I'd rather have the code, more code run through it, because my test files are included in what gets delivered to Roku, where stuff is deployed. And I don't think that anybody could ever get to access to the test files. I certainly hope not. In a deployment context, I mean. But I wouldn't want anything nefarious to happen there. So I don't want to necessarily skip my test files. So let's try and figure out how we can make the Bandit hook ignore that particular configuration option. So we want to skip. Oh, look, they even have, it must be so commonly skipped that it's right there. It was B101 is the one that is complaining about. So they must get that all the time. So we have a configuration file, and the question is, where can we put it? I would like to see if there's a possibility of using a configuration file that is part of PyProject .toml. So do I even have that file yet? No, I don't. How about that? There's a PEP. I don't remember the PEP number. Let's see if we can find it. There's for a new standard, essentially, for storing metadata about your project. And it looks like it's 621. And the idea behind it is to give everybody a single file that can be used for your projects to store information. And this can be used commonly by tools. So you could have, if you had coverage, for example, the coverage tool, you could all have that. You could have black, you could have flake8. All of them could be combined into a single file. So you don't have, half a dozen files scattered around your project. So if we can, I'm going to try and see if I can find PyProject toml support for Bandit. I don't know that it will show up or not. Let's see if this is open or closed. Okay, looks like it's still open. All right, so we can't rely on that. So it means we're going to have to use a Bandit config file. Let's see if we can find what Bandit wants to call this file normally. It might have a conventional name. And if not, we'll just make one of our own up. Because you can generate a file. Gives you an example of how to do that. So Bandit ships the tool Bandit config generator. Okay, this is going to be a little tricky because we only installed Bandit. I didn't install it into my project. I installed it through Precommit. So question is how can I access the tools that are installed in that Precommit repository? That's a really interesting question that I don't know the answer to. So we're going to go diving deeper into the rabbit hole and find out where stuff is stored. What is the repository? I want to say Precommit. Where is this going to be? I think Precommit creates everything in like a home directory. And nope. Well, is it in here? That's not in config. In cache. Okay, I think, yeah. All right, here we go. So Precommit stores everything here. I think the reason it's in this weird location, or seemingly weird location, is something based on XDG. Man, this is really dredging up some old information in my head. So XDG is a specification about where directories should be. And there's, it's used by like Linux operating systems and stuff, but it gives you like what you should store for certain directories. So for instance, there's like an XDG cache directory, and like it's XDG cache home, and I think it's that .cache directory. Let's see if my environment has that. It may not. Nope, it doesn't. But I think that's the general idea of where that's coming from. So we can go. What I'm going to do for now, because I don't know the exact repo that Precommit stored that stuff in, let's go into that directory and just search for the tool. And what was the tool called? I guess we should check. Tool from Bandit is called the Bandit Config Generator. All right. So we'll do a find on everything in the Precommit cache area, and we're going to look for Bandit config. And there it is. All right, so it's in this particular repository, and now there's no reason why we can't call that directly. So let's return to the project area where the Homeschool repository is, and then call cache precommit repo ggk pi and just get down all the way to the config, and then we can see if there's some help with this thing. All right. So you can give it an output file. What happens if you don't? Let's read here for a second. This tool generates the optional profile. It will include all the plugins and their defaults. What bugs me about the profile that I wish I could avoid is, what happens if Bandit has a new version in the future and adds new checks? You can read it here and it says, any settings which aren't being overridden can safely be removed. Okay. Bandit will prefer settings from the profile over the built-in values. And if I give it only a list of like, these are the things to run, and there are new checks added, then I'm afraid that it's not going to do what I want. But let's try running it without giving it an output file, see what it does. I guess it expects something. So let's give it a name, and I'm going to call this, before I give that a name, let's see what I call my other YAML files that are in here. Just trying to be somewhat consistent. So Precommit itself uses the full extension name. And do I have any other YAML? Looks like I don't. All right, so let's call this thing, we'll call it Bandit YAML. I'm putting a dot in front of it because I don't want to look at that all the time. I just want it to be a configuration file that my Precommit system is using that's built in there. And now we should have one. So let's take a look at it and see what it's got in it. It should be, yeah, here it is. All right. So you can see already the kind of output of this is, it's not my favorite. It's kind of obnoxious. Maybe I can leave all of this alone though. Like, look at all this stuff that's in here. Good grief. I don't know what all this is in, what all this is. So there's some like plugin settings. So I'm kind of wondering if I can delete as much as possible and then just leave it with a skips in there to skip the one that we don't want to run, the B101, and then let it default to taking everything else. So if there's a new version, it would complain about that if it was a new test that it had something failing. So before I make any deletions, let's try it. We need to, first of all, get Precommit to use the config, and then we can start tweaking things to get that going. So we'll be able to prove that Precommit is using it by having the skip of the B101 in there, and that'll be the good starting point. And this is in YAML list format this way. I don't like that style. I'm going to do the other YAML list format, which is to do this and say B101. So that's the only change we're making to this YAML file so far. And it will be easy to back out if we're wrong. So the other thing we need to do is we need to go to the Precommit file. And there is a way with Precommit to pass in extra options. And as we saw, or you might have noticed, it expects this -c if you want to specify a config file. And in fact, now that I'm saying that, let's check if Bandit itself has a config file name that it's looking for or will look for, or not. I was hoping there'd be something like, it will, if you have a file named .bandit YAML, it'll just automatically use it or something. But maybe that's not there. Okay. Well, that doesn't seem to be the case. That's fine. We've got to run Precommit Bandit, and let's return to the Precommit page and look for how you add extra arguments to Precommit, because there is a way. I don't know if it's the command line interface. This is about Precommit itself. I think it's like Addargs or something. Usage. Okay, Addargs. A list of additional parameters to pass to the hook. And that goes at the same level as all the other stuff that we have, I think. Yeah. I think what we do is we come into this area, and at this level, it's the same level as hooks, right? Well, let's see if there are any examples. Okay. It looks like it actually goes with the inside of the hooks. So we'll say args, and then it'll be a list. So the first arg is -c, and the second one is bandit YAML, was what I named the file, right? So presumably by doing that and now running this, if everything is going correctly, hey, cool. The B101, which was complaining before, is now no longer the case. So just to confirm, I'm going to comment this out and try running it again. And we should get a bunch of junk. And we did. All about the assert. So it looks like that's good news. My project has one thing that we can ignore safely, but I otherwise don't appear to have any security vulnerabilities from Bandit's point of view. I mean, there's always the possibility that there's some flaw in my code somewhere, but from at least the checks that Bandit does, which is quite a bit, that's set there. So that's nice. Okay, so we've got the config file, and let's run it one last time just to, now that I've uncommented it out, to make sure it's good. And then we'll go and start tweaking the actual config file itself. All right, so I'm going to come in over here, and I'm going to kill all of this stuff if I can. Because really, I just want to say only care about the skips. That's all I really care about. Everything else I want it to pull from the default. So I'm not sure what will happen if I do this. Because there's one of two ways it could go. It could say, like, I'm not running anything now, or it could say, essentially, because you didn't have this defined, I'm running all this stuff because that's the safe thing to do. And I guess we could do one more thing to confirm that. We could run with the Bandit YAML that we defined and then add the help. And I think it'll tell us what it's going to run. So the following tests were discovered and loaded. Well, that includes B101, so I don't really understand what that output means. Okay, well, I'm going to assume that what I did was correct because I don't have any evidence to the contrary. And it will be good enough. So when all is said and done, we have a new hook added there, and it will skip 101. And I'm going to commit this, and you probably didn't even see it there. But normally you can see the hooks visibly execute, but because there was no Python code to change there, it just said skipped them all at once and just flashed very briefly. So let's say add Bandit as a pre-commit hook for security. And that fixes, what number was that? 175. Okay. One thing down. All right. What else can we work on tonight? I had a new one. I don't think I want to get into these big topics. What I wanted to do was do some stuff with onboarding and get into a specific onboarding scenario. Let me clear out all these other tabs that are distracting me. So what's the thing that we want to do? The thing that I want to do is remove messages immediately after sign up. Okay, let's talk about this. What is this thing? I have an onboarding experience right now, and that experience, when someone signs up for the first time, dumps them to a certain start page. And that start page, I want it to be a very clear message. I want it to tell them exactly what they want to see. But let's go look at what it does today, and you'll see what I don't like about it. And you'll see what we need to try and fix. So if we go to the app, bring it up. I'm going to be logged in because I am with my test account, but I'm going to log out. And I don't have anything on this page yet, but let's go to the sign up page. So here's the sign up page. And so let's create a new sign up. And we'll do foo@bar.com and give it a password. Okay. So here's my starting page, and it's mostly how I want it to be, but there's two big glaring things that hopefully you're noticing like I'm noticing, and it's this stuff right here. And these are coming from a different one of my third-party packages that I'm using. So I use the Django Messages system. Django Messages. It's one of the contrib packages. And what it does is pretty cool. You can essentially add a message in a view, and it will store it in a cookie, I think, by default. So you do it in this style. You say messages, add message, and you put the message that you want to appear. And then when my template renders, let's go to the template to see what it looks like. I have this section right here that, because the messages has some middleware, I think. Let's go look at it. I think it's some middleware. So it's an installed app, but there's also a chunk of middleware. And this middleware will add messages to the context. It might have been, I'm sorry, I'm misleading you. It's a context processor that's adding stuff to the context, and it's this messages attribute. And so when there are messages to be added, you loop over them, and it kind of consumes them, and it will remove them from whatever session storage it was using. So if I were to refresh this page, which I won't do right now because I want to keep looking at this for a second. Well, actually, let's do this. We can do a little copy-paste action and edit, put in a screenshot here because sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? So we've got these two messages up here, and those things are being added by a different third-party package, and I don't want them. Like, some people might want them. It is information that ultimately I'll want to have users deal with, but this is an information that is not a first experience kind of thing. What I'd really like them to see, now I'm going to refresh the page. This is the view that I want them to see when they first log in, where there's nothing distracting them. There's like this bar across the top that gives a very clear path of here's what you're going to do. There's a message that's here that clearly still has stuff to do, but there's some wordsmithing that's already gone into this, that the message that I want people to read about, so that they know how to start up. And getting those two items out of the way will have the benefit of this start experience will feel pretty tight, I think. Okay, so what I don't know how to do is how to actually skip those messages. And I think most likely what's going to happen is that we won't be able to skip those messages. We'll have to consume them in the view. We have code right now, or I have code, I should say, in the core views file that represents that start view. So there's a start HTML, that's the page that you're seeing. It's this template view. It's doing very little except showing all of that information, because again, it's nothing more than a welcome page. And in the settings, when well, where'd you go? Start. Somewhere I am redirecting this thing to a certain view, and I don't know why. I don't remember how I set that up. Well, that's crazy. That's really weird. How did I do this? Oh boy. Oh, you know what? I did it in a template. That's what it was. So there's a login, there's a sign up template, and there's the next view. That was how I did it. So the the tool that I'm using for handling signups, and the reason I'm doing it is because I wanted to use email as the primary interface for what you're using as your username, and this tool made it particularly easy. It's called Django OAuth, and Django OAuth does a lot of other things as well, including like if you want to be able to log in with Google or Facebook or all these other things, you can hook that stuff up too. So I'm depending on Django OAuth, and when you do a post to the OAuth method here, which is the action of this page. So it dumps you to this page automatically as one of its sign up views. And when you post to it, it's going to look for the next parameter and do a redirect to that as sign up. So that's how I'm getting there. So the problem is, as you saw, that framework, that third-party library, sends this confirmation email sent. So actually, let's go look at the Django OAuth code and see if we can figure out where that confirmation thing is coming from and see if it's configurable. Because if it's configurable, then I can turn that off. Although I don't think I'll be able to. We'll find out. So the message was what? Confirmation. So I'm going to search for confirmation and see what shows up. We've got a bunch of instances of confirmation here. Oh my word, how many are there? Let's get it down to just the Python code. And one of these will say messages because we know that it was added by the messages framework. Well, where is it? Okay. Let's go get the code. Let's clone it and just look for it. This is fun. So let's do a git clone of, do I already have it? I don't, right? Okay. Git clone of Django OAuth. And now we're going to check it out. And open up Vim and search for confirmation. I mean, it's possible they changed the string. Nope, there it is. What file are you in? This is a PO file, so that's in a template, but it's more than a template though. Like here's definitely one place that it is. It's translated this, unless like maybe they have some interesting scheme for dealing with messages. I don't know. This is kind of new. Maybe they're rendering it as a template and that's how they see it. So it's the email confirmation sent template. So let's find where that's used. Email confirmation sent. It's a signal. Here it is. Okay, cool. So it's the email view. That's a good idea, Terrible Goss. I think what I'm most likely going to do is on that start view, there's a spot where I can add in, so I can override the context data method, which will always run on the template view. And hopefully there's a way to consume the like delete, essentially flush whatever messages are in that queue. And I'll probably most likely plan to do that as the cheapest way to do this. So I was looking first just to make sure there wasn't an option, because sometimes there's an option. And I suppose it's possible to override this email view, but that just seems like a mess. So I think what I'm clearly deducing here by staring at this code is I'm not going to get this very easily from Django OAuth itself. So I need to find a way to consume the message or flush the messages. And let's check out the message API to see, there's clearly the adding a message. And now we need to do the clearing part. And you can see the displaying the message. It does what I showed you in my base template there. And that will go through the process of like consuming stuff. So I want to do it before it gets to the template. That's the important thing. And we might need to go into that context processor and see how it consumes it, because it might just be deleting it that way through the context processor. So messages, how do we clear it? Messages are marked to be cleared when the storage instance is iterated, and cleared when the response is processed. Okay, so maybe we can just do this and then iterate the thing. It's going to look a little weird, but it might do the job. Because I don't see a clear way to say, yeah, you know what, I'm done, delete all the messages. Because it's not a common thing you want to do. Normally you want a message to be displayed to the user. So it seems like super weird to say, you know what, actually I don't. And I'm just kind of looking through this. Outside of template, you can use get messages. Right, it's true. Okay, let's try this then. And I do want to test this because this is behavior I want to preserve, assuming it works. But first, we're going to take the experimental approach, and then come back once I'm happy with what it's doing. So let's see. I think it was the storage is an iterator, right? Yeah. So we're going to say for message in messages. Stupack62. Yeah, I am a light mode person, but I'm using Flux here, which is why I am tolerant of it. Although I do get the comment quite often of like, how can you possibly look at that? So what I see is a very yellow to orange experience compared to what you might be seeing right now. Maybe I should try a dark mode for the stream, because I already have like the chrome around everything is already, dark gray, right? So, all right, let's try this. So we've got this loop, and I've already got messages imported because I'm using it for other purposes. There's a couple spots where I'm adding messages. I'm using Vim. I'm an old school Vim guy at this point. So that's my editor du jour. All right, so we've got the contacts data, and it's iterating over this. Now, what I don't know is this actually going to flush it for this request, or yep, it's a homeschool project. It's something I'm building for my spouse. We homeschool our kids, and she's been using it to plan for her next school year. And so I ultimately hope to make it useful for other families too. Yeah, it's been fun. All right, so let's go to the app. Where do we go? It's still running over here, but I don't know. Just give me the peace of mind that our changes in there, because I haven't done any test. No, we actually started homeschooling before COVID, although I think COVID would have really hammered it home for us. We had made that decision. I'm not a morning person, and neither is my spouse. And we were taking my son to a private school. It's like 30 minutes away from the house. And let me just say, that just beat me up badly. Like I've worked at home for years and years at this point, and so I'm really not used to like having to be somewhere at a certain time. And it kicked our butts for a good while. So we made the switch to homeschool, and we've been pretty happy with that and all the freedoms that it provides. All right, let's do another account. I think I did, that one was foo@bar.com, right? So let's try foo@baz.com. Give it a password and see if it worked. Dang it, it didn't work. Okay. Why not? Yeah, commute sucked too. That's true. And I've been working at home for years, partly because, so I've got 2 kids. My youngest she's 6. So about that time, right when she was born, I was commuting to Baltimore, and I live in Frederick, Maryland. So I'm on the like more western side of Maryland, and it was a solid hour plus one way. And it was miserable. I listened to a lot of podcasts and a lot of books and stuff, but there was no way to make it good. All right, I'm kind of annoyed though that didn't work, that it didn't actually consume the messages by iterating through them once. It's like the request needs more. Yeah, it is a lot of time wasted for sure. I think we're going to have to dig into the Django code and figure out if we can like get into the storage and delete the messages, because this seems to be insufficient. Thankfully, Django's a good framework. You should check it out if you're into web stuff. I do have a Django clone here because I've gotten to the point where it's just convenient. Like the web UI through GitHub's okay, but for some of this like searching stuff that I'm about to be doing, it's hard to beat having a clone in your editor locally. So we want to go to the contrib messages app, and it's get messages is the, yeah, it does. I agree. Returns the message storage on the request if it exists. Otherwise, returns an empty list. Okay, so the storage must be this underscore messages attribute, which it is. We can see that here. Okay. All right, y'all. How do we delete stuff? We might have to get into the storage itself. Oh man. Oh man. So we've got a base storage. There's an iterator. It iterates on the loaded messages. Loaded messages are here. Okay. Cool. Store, prepare, update, add. Is there no delete? Come on now. All right. What's the default message storage? Because I'm sure I'm using that. Is message storage defined? Nope. Okay. So good question. Sort of. So messages are meant to be like they're meant to be these things. They're meant to be like the flash messages when a website wants to display some little action of like, hey, you did this on the next page that you visit, to kind of give you some continuity between what's going on. That's the intended design goal of message. It's not meant to like, be used for communicating tons of stuff across the app. It's really just here's a little blurb that you need to see, and then it's consumed and it's gone. So what I was hoping with the code we were looking at a second ago, I was hoping that just by iterating through them that it would do this, but it didn't seem to. So I need to find a way to flush the messages before it gets to the template. But I think what's really happening here is get messages. Xanis, I'm not sure what you mean by a modal. So if you can expand upon that, I'm happy to try and answer. So what I want to do is take the request and go through all the messages, and it seemed to be, the docs seemed to indicate like just iterating through them would consume the message, but I seem to be seeing that like the request, it's an uncommon thing to like iterate the messages in the view and then iterate them again in the template, I guess. Yeah, I'm aware of what a modal itself is. I guess I'm curious what you mean in the context of this discussion, and maybe that's what I'm missing. So where are we going here? Let me stop flipping back and forth between a bunch of tabs. So we're in the cookie storage, but I don't know that that's the right default storage. The message that I'm using is coming from Django OAuth. So we saw, let's bring it up again, because it'd be good to have us all on the same page here. The Django OAuth picture that I'm using, package, that I'm using to have do signups is has the ability to add some of these messages. And, well, that wasn't it. Send confirmation. Yeah, okay. So in one of these contexts, it was using a template. I'm drawing a blank on what the, okay, let's get back to like first principle here. Confirmation. Okay, had it backwards. Yeah. That's right. It's meant to be like an alert. And it's like a server rendered thing, so it's not meant to be like a modal that would really, I don't want it to like take over the screen. It's just meant to be something informational. I'll even like ultimately, I might even add some JavaScript that makes it disappear after a certain amount of time. I'm not really sure, because some people hate that. But anyway, the email confirmation is here. Yeah, JavaScript you. I try to avoid JavaScript when I can, just because, I mean, it's okay, but it's not my favorite. Where did it go? I swear, y'all, I was looking at this there it is. Okay. So when you do a sign up, it does this call and it gets the messages framework that you're using and adds a message to it. And so that message, that alert, is added by a different tool, a different package. I don't have any control over it. And so we looked at this code to say, like, there's no option to turn this off. So what I'm trying to do in my code is consume it before it gets to the template rendering, essentially to delete these initial two. And what I seem to be finding, based on looking at the API of messages, is that there is no obvious, this is going to delete your messages thing. So we might have to get down into what storage option do I have? Use a link. You're being too smart, Stupak62. I'd need to iterate through your current set of messages. Yep. All right, that's what we did. If you don't want to clear them, but we do want to clear them. Okay, did we not do this then? Did I do this wrong? We have messages, we have get message, second answer. Yep, that would be like consuming them too. It is beyond me why there's no messages clear function. No kidding. So doing a list on get messages should be the same as doing an iterator. And I agree that's probably a cleaner solution, although it's going to look super magical. Like, good grief, if I don't comment this thing and I've got this line with no context, I mean, who would understand what the heck this thing is doing? Like, look at this chunk of code. That is like so not obvious. Whoops. Let's try it one more time just to see if this will do it. And then I'll add a comment if it does. Okay. Let's go back to this. We'll do... Actually, I don't think Django's all that magical. I think in terms of frameworks, like, you know, if you're comparing magical frameworks, Ruby on Rails is like 1,000 times more magical. So we're going to give some junk sign up here. Nope, didn't do it. All right. This is where we get devilish, I think, and actually like get into what is the storage doing and actually just like clear it out myself. Because sometimes you just need to bring out the big hammer. So we need to understand a couple of things. Probably need to understand what storage engine it's using. Sorry, I'm blanking out. Trace malloc. Good grief. Not that big of a hammer. Come on. Oh crap, I have some private key stuff in there, so I can't print out too much, probably. So I have a print settings command that comes from Django extensions, and we'll grep for messages, I think. So for that, nope. So the fields must not be like defined at all. It's coming from the default. So we need to find out what the default is, which we should be able to find out pretty easily, I would think, but none of this seems to be as easy as I want. Default storage, where are you coming from? Default storage is coming from storage. So storage, init, default storage. Oh my word. Message storage. All right, fine. Let's bring up the shell from Django conf import settings, settings, message, storage. What's the answer? Okay, fallback storage. Of course. It's not cookie, it's not session, it's the other one. I would have failed on that one. It's like a hybrid. Ah, all right. Well, should just read the docs. Sometimes it's fun to explore, though. Okay, so it's using cookie storage most likely. And then falling back to session storage if it can't fit in the cookie. Oh, so it gets even worse. So we might even have like 2 things that we need to do. This is way harder than it should be. So how can we clear that cookie? So we might be able to just like reach into the cookie itself. Ooh. Cookie name is messages. Yeah, I do have sessions going. So sessions is in, I'm pretty sure. So it's one of the apps that I'm using. But so we should be able to, before the template even gets rendered, to like delete cookies from the cookie storage, I think, in order to do this. And that should be on the request. So what Messages is doing here is it's coming, it must be coming into the system and invoking the storage and calling get. Get is inspecting the cookie. It's getting the data out of there. So if I just delete messages from the cookie, if it exists, then I might be like blowing away the things that were added by Django OAuth. I think that's how we could do this. Now let's check through the cookie auth to see if there's other like hidden methods that might be in here, but it doesn't look like it. It's like stuff around decoding and encoding. And so I just want to delete that from the cookies thing. Okay, so deleting from cookies. I can't remember if cookies is a dictionary-like thing. Let's look in the documentation. Well, it's not going to be on that. It's on HTTP request. And self not finished. Yeah, good question. Self not finished. I don't know. Not finished. How many times is it used? If the not finished sentinel value is found at the end of the message list, remove it and return a result indicating that not all messages were retrieved by the storage. Is that how you delete a cookie? Because I'm afraid that's too late for a template view. Because if I do it at that stage, then the template will have like already rendered, right? If it's at the response level, then it's already gone through template processing. Oh, you're seeing it here, delete cookie. And it's calling the code was showing it from request, right? So there is also cookies on the request. So I think we can get this before it goes to the response. So what I'm trying to figure out is like, what is this guy? I can't remember if it's a query dict or something else. So let's get the HTTP request docs up and a dictionary containing all cookies. So I think let's try and pop off the messages cookie and see if that does it. And this, like if we're using the fallback storage, these messages are small, right? So a cookie can only hold a certain amount of data. And if somebody is using my app and getting there for the first time, they should have like basically no cookie data for this site. So I don't think we'd ever get to the session scenario, which is the fallback aspect of this thing. So I think this is going to be pretty safe. That's my theory anyway. So let's return to the code. And this is a dictionary, but we're not positive that the messages is going to be there because again, it could end up somewhere else. Will that delete the cookies in the browser? Well, remember, cookie goes with every request. So every time you're sending a request back and forth, all of that data is being sent. So this is the request came in from a redirect from the post. So the cookie's coming in as part of the request. And then, so it's then trying to render that cookie information, I think, in the template. So it's coming from the request, and if we can get it off of the request before it even gets that far, the template won't have that information to be able to render it. That's my theory anyway. So I'm going to use to make sure that this is like safe and don't like kill myself here. I think what I'm going to try is self request cookies, and I'll probably get the actual parameter name from the storage later, maybe, but I'm going to use pop for now as a dictionary method and say messages. And I believe pop will throw an exception if the key isn't there, but if you give it a default, it will try and return that default. Because what you're trying to do with pop is like you're trying to get the value off and remove it from the dictionary. So it's like a safe way. This kind of invocation on a dictionary is like a safe way to get something when you're not even sure if the key is in there. Because the other option is I could do del request cookies, and treat it like this. Yeah, Django does work with a PDB breakpoint, so we can check that out too if we needed to. So I could do a del like this, but this start view can be returned to, and there's a chance that there will be no message there. So if I did that and I tried to delete it, then I think I'm going to get a key error on here. So by using pop, it makes it a safe operation no matter what, I think. So here's our next experiment. Let's try it out and see if it works. And I got to start the server. Return to the app. And let's do foo at test3 is our new victim. Test3.com. Witty Parrows. Hey, look at that. Score. It worked. Awesome. That's pleasing. And just to confirm that it, yeah, so that's what I gathered from the implementation. So let's let it take a look at it. So I think the base storage, when it's getting an iterator, calls get to actually get the messages. And the cookie storage says, okay, I'm storing the messages in the cookies for this cookie name. And the cookie name is this class level attribute here called messages. Yeah, so if we looked at DevTools now, like this has already been consumed before the response was sent back to the user. So there should be no cookie here anymore. Storage. Well, there is a cookie here. How did that work? How the heck did that work? Because look, there it is right there. The, well, maybe you couldn't see it. Let's, that kind of is garbled in there, but I think it's still there, right? Come on, won't expand. Go away. You can see, can I hover over it? Oh, okay, I can get in there. There was a confirmed or something in there. I think it's all been, yeah. So this is the messages. All right, so now I'm confused because it seemed like that should have cleared it out. Because there it is. What happens if I visit another page? Is it going to show up there? Damn it. So we didn't actually clear it out. Good times. Somehow we popped it off of the cookies. How can we actually like wipe that thing out? Because this is not what I want people to. I don't want this. This would be even more confusing. Can you imagine, like, you sign up for the site, you get this thing, and you go to another page, and then it says you gotta whatever. Only for one request. So the storage did not wipe the thing out. Yeah. But what do we do? Like, why is this not wiped out? That's what I don't understand. Because it went through. I wonder if we need to iterate over it too. No, the template is iterating over it, I think. Okay. Let's keep going, see what we can see. Yeah, I'm super puzzled about why, and it doesn't seem to be. What else can we try? Let's do maybe belt and suspenders approach. See if this. Now I'm just kind of guessing. I admit that, but we're experimenting with this because it's kind of fun. So I'm gonna try and delete the cookie and iterate over. Yeah, it is like the view. So the other thing we might try, like to really clobber this, is clear it from here. But you know how it also had that option of deleting the cookie? So maybe maybe we call dispatch. So this is, I'm not going to do this quite yet. We'll test this next. I'll comment this out for a second. But so dispatch is in template views is the function that all HTTP requests go through. So the GET request will be, it's like the flow is dispatch calls GET does all the work and returns something. But it's a way to like hook into the method. And I mean, I guess I could have overridden GET as well. But the point is, I want to do this. I want to do response and then call the super on this and super dispatch and pass it star args and star quargs. And then here we can do response delete. What was it? Delete cookie, and then say messages. That's kind of like the belt and suspenders approach. Yeah, I'm not quite sure, Xanis, what's going on. So we're doing a little bit of guessing here, which isn't the best way to do software development. I recognize that. This is a deterministic system, though. I'm sure there's a logical reason what I'm doing here is not working. But so that's the next thing I'm going to try. I'm not going to try multiple things at once. So I'm going to try this this next, where it's going to do the pop and do the iteration. Could I force it to use the other? Maybe I could. Like, I don't know if I don't think fallback is working to something else, but it's possible it is. So let's try this one first, though. So we're going to do start the server. We're going to go I'm going to log out and do a new user. This will be foo@test4.com with a junk password. All right. Now, there it still is, the cookie. Interesting. Maybe it is session state. Maybe a session's adding it. Well, this is session scoped. I don't know. I don't understand what this means well enough. This is probably not, it doesn't, I doubt this corresponds to the session that Django thinks of. I could write my own storage and add a delete method. Yeah, so if we go to the next page, there it is. Messages that we don't want to see. Okay, let's try Let's do this next one though. Let's try and delete it from the response. Like maybe somehow the request had cached some aspect of it, and we need to do the belt and suspenders approach. And I want to make sure it was actually delete cookie. Yeah, response delete cookie. In the dev tools, anything under session storage? I don't know. Looks like no. All right, so we now have the cookie. Yeah, okay, that makes sense to me too. Cookie will expire after session's over. So now we're deleting the cookie on the request, and we're going to try and delete the cookie on the response. And you can see, like here it is after. So this view has now like consumed it. And if we click around, the messages is gone. No, I'm not, but I'm giving, I don't think that would matter because the messages we're seeing like have the email address that I'm using for the new account. So it is saying like foo@test4. So if it was a problem with like leakage between user accounts, then I would expect that to be from like the previous time. So let's try, and I'll leave DevTools up this time. Let's do a sign up. We'll go to foo@test5 and give it a password. Sign up. Ah, no data. No data. Okay. Cool. So I don't know why we needed both. And maybe now here's a good question. Do we need both? Is this something that could I have gotten away with just doing dispatch? Because I don't want to have both of these things in there if they're not necessary. All right. I think we need it because I think the request is going to render it. That's what's going to go through the template in the context processor, but it'd be good to confirm. So foo@test6.com. Yeah, all right. So we need to have this, and we also need to delete that. And someday I will ask someone who does Django actual development on the project, who understands this stuff super well, and figure out why it needs to be on both sides. Does the cookie storage view not auto update? So this time, I think because it rendered, it was consumed before it got, so whatever happened, consumed it at the template level and didn't need to send it as a cookie because they were rendered in the response. That's what's confusing to me. Like, I don't understand why when we like actually remove this and when we had the iterator, why wasn't that good enough to like exhaust this so that it wouldn't be persisted with the cookies? If I go to a new page, the alert should not be there because they're not in the cookies anymore. And so when Django renders the page, there's no messages to render. Good question though. I mean, this is kind of confusing stuff. This should be more logical than it seems like it is. Or, you know, really it could just be that my mental model is inaccurate about what's really happening and where things are being stored. And it's just surprising me in ways I don't anticipate. All right, the one other thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that we don't need to you can go write that PR, Stupak, see how that goes. Yeah, there you go. It'd be a good one. I bet people would appreciate the existence of that API. So I'm going to try one more test that has it with the iterator not in there to make sure that that just having the cookie pop and the delete is sufficient. Okay. So this is foo at test7.com, I think is what we're up to. And cool. Seems to have done the job. Okay. Now what? Do my tests still pass? That's one question. And then if they do, I need to add, whoops, sorry about that. I need to add more tests. And I also need to document this thing because this is still like what's going on here. So let's say remove alert. There we go. We can use the alert in it. Alert messages contributed by Django OAuth. Yeah, I think that's because, I mean, Django, if you look at it, it has been around for a long time. I want to say it started in 2005. It's not a new framework by any stretch of the imagination. Obviously, it's perfect. Totally. No bugs to see here. No, I know that the Django fellow would disagree pretty strongly with you on that. I think I listened to one of the Django podcasts and he's one of the hosts, and he says they get like 5 PRs. I don't know, five issues a day, something obscene, a lot of requests. So, you know, even something that's been around as long as that still has issues to work out. Okay, let's get back to it though. So let's run the tests. So let's go to the core test views, because these are going to be in this area, and we'll run the tests, and hopefully everything still passes, because, you know, it wasn't really doing anything that crazy. And I guess delete cookie is safe if the cookie is not there. That's kind of a lucky thing. And then we had this pop thing here. In fact, maybe we can, I told you that it would probably fail if we did the del on it. So let's try it with the del and see if I'm right. Cookies, messages, comment out this line, and then rerun the tests. And one of these should fail, I hope. Yep. Gave me a key error, which is what I expected. Okay. So now let's go to the start view tests, which I just at this point have one. What made me want to start streaming? Good question. A podcast. I was listening to, I'm drawing a blank on her name. Very popular streamer, Noobcat. Is that what she goes by? No. It was on the changelog. Is the podcast. Changelog.com. This is a really great podcast if you've never listened to it. And let's search for Twitch. No-op, yeah. Suze Hinton. There we go. I don't know why I just blanked on her name. She's and she's definitely not a noob. That was really, I just thought it was like a cheeky thing that she did, but it's not really actually what she calls herself. No-op cat. Anyway, this was a really great interview, or I thought anyway, and it was compelling enough to be like, this seems like something fun to try and share what I've experienced. So I guess I listened to that back in March, and I started streaming myself a few months later. I don't know if I was catching up on the podcast or what, but I've been doing it for a while. I've I've got a bunch of stuff on my website if you want to go check out past streams, because I put them all up on YouTube. So there's tons of recordings. But you're here right now, so you don't need to do that. Okay, so I want to write a test to prove this, and I think that's going to finish off the stream for the night. Yeah, I think Suze is she's an interesting person. She's quite a personality. So let's write the test. The test needs to say what? We want to check two things. We want to check that a message is not in the response content. So if I add messages to there, I don't want that to show up in the response. The other thing is I need to make sure that the cookie does not appear in the response as well. Live Coders Con. I don't even know what that is. Sounds cool though. I mean, it sounds pretty self-descriptive, so I can guess what it is. So let's see. No messages on visit. There is one downside to this approach that we've taken, is that it's a pretty blunt tool, and it will kill all messages. So if someone happens to come back to the start page, then that looks like a safe link. If someone happens to come back to the start page, then they will not get any messages. Oh. Right code. Oh, that's cool. Team directory. How many people are on here? You're trustworthy. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. The live coders. Oh, that's quite a little list here. Whoa, it keeps growing. Whoa. All right, cool. Huh. Maybe I should look into it more. When I first started streaming, I was helping out with the awesome stream list. Awesome developer streams. I don't know if you've encountered this one. So there's this big list of awesome streams, I guess, for developers. So it's like, so I was the one. Selfishly, I wanted to get my own name on this list, and I'm in here somewhere doing my Django thing. And there was a backlog of like 20 PRs. And Tierney here was doing his darndest to stay on top of it, but because of the way that it was set up initially, like every new streamer was added to the bottom, which meant that every time a merge happened, there'd be a merge conflict for every other PR after that. So I stepped in and said, hey, if we alphabetize this, then it's likely not going to have that problem, and it should be a lot easier to manage. And so I did the first crack at alphabetizing it, which is about as much like editorializing as you wanted to add there, because otherwise you get into like weird questions of, do I want to have it by programming language or by topic? And there's a 1,000 different ways to do that. But alphabetizing seemed pretty safe. And once that was done, we got the floodgates through, and we were able to get some other people to come in and clean up a lot of, I did the initial list, but other people made this pretty. And yeah, it's quite a list these days, you can see. Anyway, that was my little contribution to Twitch streaming when I started. Did we use Python to sort it? I don't think so. It was a big, it's like well, it wasn't a YAML file, was it? I think it's just a big README. Yeah. So everything has to be like formatted. It's just a raw README, and everything is formatted very carefully, and we had to go through and like check everybody's links, and it was a lot of stuff. Looks pretty good these days, though, this in terms of being a directory of people online. Okay, cool. Cool to learn about live coders. That's neat. Let's finish out the project and the test case. So clear out messages from Django OAuth on signup. That's the goal here. And I think what I want to do is maybe use the actual messages framework and add a message to a request. Is that going to work? I'm trying to think of how I can do that. Because I'm using the Django Test Plus tools, and they give you this nice client that you invoke like this, but it doesn't give you access to the request object. So it's possible we might have to invoke this view directly, unless I can find a way to get at the request before it's called. Oh, rats. Okay, I think I have Django Test Plus cloned. See if there's an easy way to get at the request on it. Test Plus. I don't think we're going to get much love here. Let's see what we can find. It's defined here, and it's calling get. Is there a, which is calling this request method. And can I add in my own HTTP request? That's what I'm after. Method, it's taking the client. Okay, we're getting to it. So it's a Django client, I think. Okay. Get API client. Man, this gets pretty deep in there. There's a compatibility. Oh my word. Forgot how software with all its layers. Okay, so we can get, that's the API client. I don't need the API client. I don't need the regular client. Let's keep looking. Oh, okay. So test case is coming from Django test case, and so it's got a client instance. The question is, can we get a request into that client instance? All right, I think I'm kind of convincing myself that this might be a scenario where that's going to be annoying. And so it'll be easier to use a request factory and construct our own request object. So I'm using Django Test Plus, so I should be able to have access to the request factory fixture, which I don't remember how to use. Python Django. And we want, where's my brain? No. Here it is, Django helpers. Fixtures. Okay. So we can make a request, and then once we have the request, then we can call messages on it to add the message, which should add the cookie, right? And I'm going to comment out the code that we added earlier to ensure that the whatever sample message is not in the response content. And then once we've done that, we can also check that the response itself doesn't have the cookie as well, so that both of those things get cleared out. Okay, so request is request factory get. I really think that this doesn't matter, the actual URL. I don't really understand this part of the request factory and why it expects a URL. I've never really understood that. But then we're going to import. Do we already have messages in here somewhere? Nope. So we're going to go from Django contrib import messages, I think. And then we can go back to that method. And we can say messages dot add message, and it takes the request object and a level, which will be messages dot info or something. It doesn't really matter, and a message. We'll call it find me. And I need to actually spell request properly. Okay, so now we have this. Hopefully that does nothing. Nope. Test missing one required positional argument. What did I do? Oh, this is a test case. I can't use fixtures in the same way. Dang it. Okay. Well, I guess we're going to get the request factory the old-fashioned way. Does this have request factory? No tests. All right. I don't know. All right, let's look at the code again. Come over here. See if request factory is imported anywhere here. It creates it when you call get. That's like too late though. Oh, but that's troubling because now, oh, but again, I'm not going to be using get. I'm going to be calling that directly. So I guess that answers the question of does it have a request factory? The answer is no. So we need to import that from Django test. So from Django test import request factory. And come back down here and we can say request factory, create an instance, and then call get on it. That should give us a request. Now, come on now, what's going on now? Oh, I didn't write that file. Oh, rats. I forgot it doesn't have the middleware. So we can't call that without the middleware. Man, it's just getting harder and harder. You want the test to be the easy part, and then sometimes they aren't. Django messages in test. And I think I've encountered this before. I believe my code might even have something in here for testing this. So we don't want any of the views files. That's not helpful, but that's the one we just added. Okay, So I have an example where I've got, oh, okay. So what is happening is I think the client does actually set up all of the middleware. I might be wrong on that, but that's why. So what's going on in this test is the test is actually caring about the message itself. I wanted to check the message. So that's what's going on. And I had to do this craziness with this stuff, which was stupid, frankly. Like there should be better testing tools that make this easier. This is not a criticism of the Django developers, by the way. It's just, they're busy and not everything gets written. So it looks like the only thing I've done here is try to check the view code that is adding a message on its own. But now we're doing the opposite, where the test is simulating adding a message so that the view can handle that. So we still would like to use the client, or how do we, I guess the question becomes, how do we add a message to the request and yet still have it with the middleware available? I don't know how to do that. And this is an example of using it and getting that message out. But I don't know if there's an example of what we're talking about, the inverse. Yep, I mean, that's true. I could probably, you're right. I think what I could probably do is, what I was hoping to do is like exercise the messages framework, but maybe that's overkill. Perhaps what we really could benefit from is, instead of coming to here, so we know presumably request has a cookies dict on it. Let's try it. Let's see if it's there. Cookies, print the type on that, and then we're gonna fail just so that it will actually print this stuff out. That attribute should be there, and it is. It's just a dictionary. So yeah, maybe that's the right way to go, is to just add that directly to the request and then go from there. Because if this code is not here, then the template is going to render and will include that find me thing that I guess I just deleted. Oops. Okay, let's try that. Let's say request cookies. Well, the question is though, what is the, this is maybe why I wanted to do it through the messages framework, because I don't know if I don't think I can just directly store this. I think it's encoded. So this is not reflective of how messages work. I think it's like JSON encoded data, or when we saw it, when we were looking at, where did it go? One of these was Django, right? I think I closed it. When we were looking at Django and looking at the messages cookie storage, it had a message encoder and decoder. Like there's some stuff going on here, and that's what I was trying to avoid, is like dealing with any of this stuff. My hope was just like, let me just turn on messages and try and pass in a message and let it process this stuff, and do that. So question is, can we get away with this? There might be another strategy here that we still might be able to do this. I still would like to go this route because I think it's going to be easier. So we might try, let's try turning the middleware on. Let's try adding the middleware. If the problem was the middleware is not here, and it's complaining that you have to have the middleware on, then let's add it to the middleware for that setting. So we can go to, where can we go to try this? First let's copy this string because we're going to need it. And Django override middleware. So there's probably override settings. No. There's a testing decorator called override settings, I think. And so here's an example of it. So you add it as a decorator. Oh, this might be the one we want though. And look at that. Haha. They give us modify settings, and the example they use is middleware. Yeah, so if I use the add message interface, then I might have missed your message. You might have been commenting on that in the past. But if I use the add message interface, it should do the encoding, I think, because it will go through the middleware, probably. And check on this appropriately. All right, so let's see if we can understand what is this doing? There's like append and prepend. This is funky. Huh. Oh, okay. Let's try this. I've never used this one before, so this will be new for me. So we're going to go, and I think even, oh, that's a cache example. So let's look and see, where does the middleware one, the messages one, sit? I don't know if the order matters. Yeah, it's kind of right in the middle. So let's append it and see if that works. So we want to go, it's not in that file. I'm running low on real estate here. So Django test, that's where it is, and then modify settings. And then return to the test and say at modify settings middleware equals a dictionary, and say append this guy. And what's that going to do? Is it going to work? You cannot add messages without installing. Well, I just did, didn't I? All right, maybe I did it wrong. Django modify settings example. Does seem to be this append thing. You know, that's a good question. I've not tried it. And you would think that as someone who has used Vim for as long as I have, which is to say since 2006, so a sizable amount of time now that I would have tried it at this point. But I never have. I don't know. Something about, I feel like most of the web is not super well designed for pure text or keyboard navigation. So I've just gotten comfortable with the mouse for that particular aspect. So, okay. So looking at this traceback and how it's getting here, it's trying to access underscore messages, which we know by looking at the code like we did earlier, that is coming from the messages contrib app. It's an attribute that's added to a request. So it seems like the request factory is, maybe it ignores this, and maybe it's just making a stupid one. I don't know. Can we get around? Can we hack it? Let's try hacking it. Request messages. YOLO. Just give it the list that it expects. Spell it right first with 2 S's instead of 3 and see what happens. Hack the plan. Well, okay, we're getting closer. A list object has no attribute add. All right, fine. Let's come back over here. Look at the Darknet Diaries. I don't know what that's about. I think I'm kind of working myself into a corner with what I'm doing here. Like, yes, I'm matching the interface, but I'm really cheating the system here. And it's not liking that. I'm looking at the base storage and not finding that. So let's go back to the API. And this is why I thought it might work, because if you look at this, it seems like it does return a list, but it's probably just doing that for a safe operation. Oh, okay, hacker related stuff. It's probably just doing that so that it's always safe. So if something tries to iterate over messages, because the API just does return something empty, and the storage, it's the storage that's what's stored in the message attribute, right? So, okay, now talking this out loud, remember the way this worked is default storage called yeah, we might be able to do this. All right, I'm still gonna go like a hacky route, but we're gonna try it this way. So we're gonna go to, what are we gonna do? We're gonna go from Django contrib messages storage, import default storage. There have got to be better ways to do this, but this is what I'm going to try. And then we'll create a default storage and pass it the request, because I think that's what I saw down at this. Yeah. So here's the example down here. And so it's saying this is the default. So if you didn't have it, return the storage. So that means to me that the messages and the default storage are equivalent. So now, hopefully, what we have is an ability to put a message onto the request. But it went to session. For crying out loud. Okay. I'm gonna keep hammering on it until it goes. All right, what's the other storage option we have? That was the default. But we can go to cookie and we can get the cookie storage directly. So now we're really I'm really committing to this cookie storage thing. Just resize my editor by accident. Cookie session, whatever. We're not going to be using the fallback one because that one is trying to use session, which it doesn't have because of the middleware. Really what's missing is the middleware, and I don't know a dynamic way to add that for this request. So we're going to go here. We're going to go to cookie, and then we're going to import cookie storage. I think that's what it was called. Yep, cookie storage. And then we're going to go down to default and change this to cookie storage. So now we're getting explicit about the kind of storage that we have. That's what I thought too, but maybe it might have to, fallback might try when it's creating its fallback, it might need both of them as a composition internally in the init or something. That's what I'm guessing. See if this adds. Hey, would you look at that? We've got cookie storage. All right, so we haven't actually asserted anything yet. So now we're ready, excuse me, to get a response from the template view. So we need to get the start view. Start view is going to be the start view as class, and we will get the response on the start view with the request. Gosh, that was, I am on a laptop, yes. Okay, so, and then this was a core view. So we'll say from Homeschool core view import start view. And the reason you don't see any, we're in a test views file, but this is the first time I'm importing a view, is because normally I'm using the client. You're right, it's not good for my ergonomics. This is my streaming setup. It's the best I can muster, and also my children are asleep. I normally type on a Kinesis Advantage 2, so most of the time I'm giving my wrists a nice break, but not today. And I don't normally stream for 2 hours either, so this is a bit beyond the norm. Okay, so we're finally ready to check content, and I know there is a test plus method to check on content, and I never remember what it is. Assert what? Assert response contains, I think. Well, we really want assert response not contains. And we can give it a response if we have one. So we'll say self assert response not contains, and we don't want it to find me in there, and we want to pass in the response. All right, what am I not using? Whoops. I don't know how that worked at all. Okay. I have no idea how I was importing that. Oh, I hadn't run the test yet. Oh, not as class, as view. Good grief. You gotta build it all yourself. Okay, we're getting close though. Request user, self, make user. This is all because we don't have middleware on. I have, this is an old 2015 MacBook Pro, so I've got the better keyboard. I don't have the crappy butterfly one. You gotta be joking me. Doesn't have a session. Oh, and a session. All right, how can we? That's a different kind of session. I know I've written tests in the past where I add a session in the test. So I'm going to go to a different project and see if I can find an example where I've done this elsewhere. I used to stream on a different project that I was building for, well, I won't bore you with all the details there. It was a different project. Let's see if it's got a session somewhere. So a session, I added to this request factory class. 2 point, yeah, that was an old virtual environment error. It was not on 2.7. I think I have a tool that's trying to auto activate an environment. So yeah, don't fret too much about it. I'm not using 2.7 for a long time. Okay, what's going on here? Oh, tricky. So I guess this is a way that we could invoke a middleware on a request. Or maybe we need to. This is how I added a session to this other project. This is going to be the craziest freaking test on this whole thing, just because of what we're trying to do. Well, here we go. And session middleware, where'd you come from? This test will, although I say that, taking a long time, it's actually not going to be doing that. It's going to have a couple of constructors, but it's not going to be that much in the scheme of things. Okay, let's see if we've got it. So now I'm adding all sorts of stuff. This is a lot of setup for this test, just for this payoff of not finding this little bit of string in here. All right. It could not find me, but that's good. That's actually promising. That means that it's really checking the content. So now if we comment out this stuff, hopefully the real count response should not contain find me. And so that's what I would expect when I don't have this stuff. But then we did all of that work to have this and this be on to like actually clear out the message, right? So I would expect this to pass. And I'm getting a new deprecated warning. Okay, well, we'll have to deal with that. Assuming I can get this test to pass. Good grief. All right, so what is the response content then? I think it's content. Trying, man. Response content must be rendered before it can be accessed. Didn't I render it by calling the view? Okay. Motivational video. If it's Shia LaBeouf, I'll say no thanks. Okay. What is this content thing? Is it some kind of delayed? Oh, wow. Oh, that's even an attribute access. Oh, now I'm really nervous, man. I don't have a second screen that I can go like pre-watch to make sure. Although you've been pretty trustworthy so far. It's wholesome. Okay. I'll take your word for it. If not, you're both banned. I don't have any audio. This guy's intense. Very nice. Very nice, y'all. Well, we're going to keep trying. I need to figure out why the content is not coming. I think it's the type of response that's coming back from the template view. Oh, it's a template response. So I can't remember. Does it have a render method? I don't know. So let's check it out. Let's see why it's blowing up. There is a render method on it. But why what I don't understand is we called the view. I guess a template responses delay, don't they? Until later. Okay. Response render? I don't know. Whoa, there it is. It's like impossible to see though. So, okay, I'm just gonna, this is super hacky, but it'll work. Toss this into another Vim and search for find me. There it is. That's a message. It shouldn't be there. Why are you there? Did I use the mouse? I did to highlight this because this is like, so I have Vim test. I don't know if you're Stupak. I don't know if you're a Vim user or not, but I have Vim test to run all my tests, and it's great most of the time because it gives me a quick feedback loop. But the only time that it's not great is when I want to actually like copy something from the test output, because as soon as I hit enter, all of my terminal goes away because I don't put it in the same terminal, like kind of split or something like that. You don't write tests. Okay, so it's adding a message when it shouldn't be. Why? Why are you adding this message? So we are Let's try printing the request cookies now to see what it did. What? Okay. So I haven't even called the view yet the other request cookies is empty. I wonder if it stored it in the session. But I can't because we didn't actually give... Because I made the messages storage, used the cookie storage, and yet adding a message has an empty cookies. What? And somehow the find me ended up in the view response. I have not used Vim dispatch. What is that? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Is this a new one? I know that async wasn't like a thing that has always been in Vim. Cool. I'll have to check it out later. All right. Staring at the test again. And my brain is rapidly running out of steam, y'all. So we'll do our best to wrap this up. But so I added a message here. I gave it the request. I guess we could trace this through and see what path this went down. So I could bust out the debugger here and figure out why in the world does the cookie not have it. Because it certainly seems like messages is storing this find me somewhere long enough that the request here is able to render it such that the response has it. That is like mind-boggling to me right now. I don't understand how that's working. Unless it's also storing it in the session, but again, I'm not using the fallback middleware. Yeah, I don't know. I think the two are unrelated, but I could be wrong. The part of the test that's failing. All right, so Rockerboo, I don't remember if you were here when we started this whole adventure. So I'm trying to get rid of this alert message, right? And the way that we did some testing of like getting the alert message, and found that through just like trial and error with poking at cookies and stuff, that we're able to get, we're able to get this alert messages out of the response when somebody signs up. That's the whole goal of this. And it worked. Like, it clearly didn't have the cookie in there. The messages weren't sticking. So the whole point of this test was to basically confirm the behavior that we saw in the browser, but at a test level. So since it all seemed to be happening through cookie storage, the thought was, let's write a test that uses cookie storage and observe that the whatever text here, which happens to be find me, doesn't show up in the output. But I mean, as you just saw, like, I ran the test, I printed the cookies dictionary. That dictionary is empty and it failed. So the only conclusion that I can come to is that their request is getting that find me stored somewhere else. Yeah, the alert goes to so the flow is like the sign up page is successful. So this is a third-party package that's adding this alert, and when it signs up a new user, creates the new user record and all that, it adds one of these alert messages and then does a redirect to the next page. So it's kind of a handoff so that when you reach the next page, it will show the alert to show, hey, I took the action on the previous page. But the way I'm implementing this, I don't want to show them because I think they're big and distracting for being the first view that people sign up at. So it should not be putting these alerts in there. So all I can conclude based on what I've seen so far is that this request is storing this data elsewhere. So let's try printing the session and see if it's in the session. I don't know if the session... Yeah, I don't want the alert to show on this main page at all. That's the goal for this particular thing. All right, there is a session store. I don't remember if the session is a dictionary-like object or what. Okay. Going to go back to Django and look at the session version of this. Goes by the session key of messages. Yeah, the cookies is being updated with the alert. That's right. So the session key they claim is _messages. Let's see if for whatever reason find me got put into the session. Nope. All right, what are the keys in here, y'all? Or it's not really like a dictionary, is it? Nothing. What the heck? How is this possible? My brain's about to explode, I think. We pass in a request. Yeah. That's an interesting point. That could probably bypass all of this. No, it couldn't, because if this is a good thought, Stupak, but I think what's going to happen here is like when we remember that example where we like click the next page and it appeared. If I don't, oh, okay, this is like modifying the display, so it's still going to consume it, but just hide the CSS. Save sessions after adding the message. Yeah, okay, I think it's time to like, yeah, I see what you're saying. It is like, I could take that route, basically let it render and then just hide them for that specific page. That could possibly work as like some kind of override. So if this doesn't, I was hoping to like solve it at the data level, but I guess if we could paper over it by just saying, it's fine. Maybe a good sleep is needed. You're right. Let's try one more thing, because I'm super curious, like, where is this find me going? Because we looked at session, or we looked at cookies, we looked at session. Both of them appear to be empty, as far as I can tell, and yet the find me is still showing up in the response. So what happened there? So let's put in a debugger, and I think I need to test with -s. Maybe. And let's step in here. Yeah, that's an old, I'm not on 3.8 for everywhere yet. Like my work still uses Python 2. So my Vim configuration is just set to use PDB. set trace. I have got to do a leader key, so I don't even have to type breakpoint. I type space bar D. Yeah, it's 2.7. So it's been a long journey. That's what happens when you have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of lines of Django code. It takes a long time. All right. So let's see. What is the type of request messages? We have it. It's the cookie storage, right? So we should be able to go next, 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 and it's going to go to add the message. All right. So this is all making sense so far. And that's the end of the thing. So we got to step in here. And where are we? Next. Next. Let's just skip over the constructor, assume that that's cool. Queued messages. We're in the base storage. Really? Is there a PEP for that? Or are you just pulling my leg? Gotcha. All right, so it put it on queued. Oh. Man, this seems like it'd be highly controversial. Pattern matching. Cool. So look what's happening here. The storage is going on to queued messages. So it might not be persisting the messages the way that we, like it might not be in cookies because that wasn't come from the incoming request. If we do, I bet I know where it is. Request, messages, queued messages. Boom, there it is. So it doesn't matter that we tried to, like, this makes sense now. Or it makes more sense than it did a minute ago. It's not in session. I'm pretty confident of that. It is in this queued messages thing, which might help to explain like why the popping doesn't work. So if it was in queued messages, all right, it's starting to come together, I think. Then this did nothing. And then what happened would, it must have gone through the rest of rendering and actually consumed that and put it on the response. And then delete message, deleting the cookie on messages also does nothing because at that point it's too late. So the reason that this worked in our real example is because, well, I'm not really positive why that is. But I think we're at least can see, we can go back to the queued message thing. Let's see where this is. Nope, must be in the base. Queued. So there's like this concept, I guess there's a concept of loaded messages. Maybe that's the one from the cookie itself, like if you're coming in there for the first time. Aha. Well, that's a contains thing. Uh-huh. Yep. Look at this. Loaded messages comes from calling get. If we put the cookie one side by side, get will finally get it from the cookies. But so what happened, I think, is when it fell through here. It says, all right, give me the item in loaded messages or item in queued messages. There was no item in loaded messages because there was nothing in cookies. So that didn't work. So I feel like this would work better if loaded messages, if we could actually come over to the test and use cookies and set it directly like we tried to do initially, then what would happen on the view is it would pull from loaded messages, but because the context data would have this pop statement, that would be it would be prevented from using loaded messages. I don't know if that made any sense to you, but it made sense to me. All right. So kind of back to, can we just add this to the cookies on the request directly and get rid of this nonsense around actually dealing with cookie storage? Or it might need to exist, but get rid of this line around add message. So maybe we need to, you seem pretty sharp for an actuary. Although that seems like a slight. I'm sorry, that's totally rude. I'm sure they're brilliant actuaries. Your development skills seem pretty sharp for an actuary. I wouldn't anticipate an actuary to be strong in development. That's what I meant to say. And if I still have my foot in my mouth, I apologize. All right, so what can we do? I guess the question is, can we make a message that that is in that encoded format, right? So if this is a message encoder, and could we run it through there to set it directly? That way we would get the benefit of getting it like a loaded message as if it was data from another view, which does kind of replicate the real scenario anyway, right? This is stuff that a different view had stored in the cookie, and this is in the real cookie, which is a truer test. So I think I'd like to see if that's possible. There is an encoder. When does the decoder kick in? Well, we'd have to make an encoded message and let it decode the thing. Encode takes messages. Where's this called? Store. Okay. Is store another one that's in the API here? Yep. So what calls store? Store is the queued messages. All right. So we could call, in theory, could create a message and call messages encode on that message to get the encoded data that's here, and then take the encoded data and, well, no, I'm being dumb. We could just get the messages, which is a list, and call the store on the storage. So take a list of messages and store it on the response. On the response? Really? Yeah, it's calling set cookie, but that's too late, isn't it? For what we want? I think it is. Really, what we could do is create an encoded message once, see what that looks like, and then just take that string and copy it into the test. I think that's probably good enough because the likelihood of this format changing on this framework is really low in my mind. So I want to see what that encoded data is. So we need to take a message, which is coming from where? Message is a level and a message and then some extra stuff, which we don't need. All right. Yeah, you're right. All right, so from, where did we say that was? What class was that? It's in the base class. From Django contrib messages storage base import message. It's probably a more convenient import for that, but it doesn't really matter. And we want the message to be a message of messages info is the level, because it was the level first, right? And then the actual message of find me. And then we don't care about extra arguments. And then we want, well, now we've got a message. And then we want to, or I want to do this. I want to print out the request. Where does the encode, does the encode, encode does return the data. What is a signer? That's not good. This could be really broken. Ah, crap. All right, we might have to dynamically generate this every time, because if I took the raw string, then the signed version of this cookie, which is really what we're getting at, could change. So I might have to do this like encoding nonsense. So we encode is it a single message? Nope, list of messages. Encode a list of messages when there's only one. For the moment, let's take out the set trace and just print it and see what happens. See if I got close. Yeah, this is quite the test, and I don't even know that I like it. And for what it's testing, it's really like, I've spent a lot of time just thinking about it, but I think it's been more of like a learning experience for me than anything, getting down into the details of how all this stuff is working. It does feel like aligning the stars and the moon. All right, so now what are we going to do? No, not even close. My normal test, this is more aligned with a normal test, like 3 lines. That's maybe a little unfair. This is like the simplest test where you're getting a user and you check that it's an okay. And some of the more complicated ones have some factories where they make some data. So they can get a little bit more complicated for my test, but usually the pattern that I have is set up some data, try and go to that URL, and then assert on some context of the data or something in the response. This craziness, like, here's a feedback opportunity for Django developers at some point, is like, there needs to be better ways to test messages. This is nuts. And yeah, like, and it could be that I'm doing something that has an easy mode and I just don't know where it is, and someone could probably say like, it's over here. But then again, the messages framework doesn't have a clear API, so I'm not doing something that is normal, and I'm going off a beaten path quite a ways, so that could just be the reality. Yeah, so let's try. Okay, now I think we're maybe in a position to test out my theory that adding to cookies directly will work. So let's do this. Let's do request cookies, and we know the key is messages, and we've encoded the messages into the cookie, right? What did I just do wrong? Oh, I've got an extra paren. So now we've got this encoded form, and let's comment out this thing, because that was doing some extra stuff that was using like queued messages. And so now if we don't have this in the queued messages, then in theory, when the view is processed, it'll only be able to get the loaded messages from whatever's in cookies. But because our view is popping off of that variable, I'm speculating that it won't be able to find it, and the test might actually pass. Hey, to look at that. It passed with a warning. So we've got this warning that says, I'm not using the middleware properly. Yeah, that's pretty exciting. And it wasn't that slow. It's a fairly slow test. That's half a second. That's considering my whole suite of like 300 tests takes about 10 seconds, then this is a slow test for sure. All right, so how much of this can we clean up? And how much do we actually still need to keep? There's a lot of it that we may still need to keep. So all we managed to get rid of is this add message. But the add message was complaining about needing a session. So we might be able to get rid of the session middleware. Let's try. I'm not going to delete it fully yet. Let's like chip away at it. Nope, wrong. The view needs a session because of a totally different reason. All right, we'll leave it in. And we'll get rid of the print. And then the other thing we want to check is that the response does not have a cookie in it. So I don't actually know what the API for that is. Assert response, because it seemed like it was delete cookie to do the deletion. So is it not just cookies like it was on the request? Because here it is for the request, but response might be different. Come on. Wow, I don't even. Oh, that's still request. Query dict. Here we go. Response. It doesn't have many attributes, so the cookies is not a direct attribute, it seems. Is it? There's a signed cookie. Well, that's a set one. And delete. What the heck? How do you get the cookies? Get cookie? No? All right. Django response get cookie. You can set it, no problem. It's on the request. Well, that's annoying. All right. Let's figure out what's on the response. Okay, it has cookies on here. So what are you? Print response. Well, it's probably going to be empty. Messages, empty. It's like the header. That's like an HTTP header. That would be a real pain to check, potentially. Okay, now it's time to actually like see if the test is really holding its own. And I'll move that import after I'm done. I thought that was going to be temporary, but I think we're going to have to make it a permanent thing. So let's get rid of this. And let's come up here and comment out the 2 chunks of code that we created. And this should fail. And it fails because we didn't delete the messages cookie from during this context step. Like this. And, you know, in fact, now that I'm thinking about it, I think I only use get context data because it was like a convenient place to do it. But since we have to override dispatch anyway, it's probably better just to collapse this down into one method that's going to be changed. So that is required in order to make this work. Let's see if we can, and let's return the print of the cookies to see if curious. So it's printing out nothing now. Whereas when I have this, it actually adds it by calling delete cookie, but it adds it as empty. So the delete is actually adding a cookie. What? Okay. I mean, behaviorally, this was the right thing, so I'm okay. I'm okay leaving that for now. All right, what I was going to say, though, is like, we can probably like sandwich the dispatch call. So let's put this up here. Let's move this to up here, and let's delete that. By doing that, we're essentially like saying, we really seriously want you to delete this messages cookie thing. All right, that was actually passing, but I still had the assert false in there. Okay. This is really close. So the next thing I want to figure out is the middleware. I can't call some part of the middleware with none. Passing none for middleware get response argument is deprecated. Oh, okay. The middleware probably, when you build a middleware, it probably needs a lambda. Well, it needs a function that can handle, what does it take? It's an API contract that it has to follow for what the response is given. I think it like, all right, now I'm really getting down into the weeds, but there is an API contract that all middleware has to follow. So when it's invoked, it gets this get response function. The response function is something that takes a request and returns a response. So we can do a lambda, takes a request and return an HTTP response. Jeez, but if we do that, I'm not passing through the response that it was given. I don't know. Can't it take the request variable? Yeah, I think that's, maybe I'm just, my brain is like zapped at this point. So I think what I'm confused about is like, how do I just let it be a pass through, basically? Because if it always has to return a response, I mean, I don't have a response to build there. Because if I return this HTTP response, it does nothing. Well, that's not even valid syntax. Hold on. If I do that, come on. From Django HTTP import HTTP response. All right, so now I'm going to give it a response. I think this is going to fail now, though. Or not pass for the reasons I want it to. Because the content may now be nothing. Because this is saying, like, you're going to return this response instead. But maybe it doesn't matter, because I'm not, this is, I don't know. All right. We'll look at one more thing, and then I promise I have to be done, because my brain's about to melt out of my ears. So let's look at the middleware. And, okay, good. So it doesn't really matter, because even though it's getting a response and it's getting none, the process request that we're calling for this test is not doing anything with that. So it really doesn't matter. And the truth is, like, the way I've set up this test is, it's not great. Like, I pulled that code, I stole that code from that other project because it was something I had already built up. Like, I had built this special request factory class, and I was declaring a customized request factory that will add the session middleware if I added this Boolean state. So this is from my other project. And here I am inlining that with what I've got here. So to make this really actually what I want, I have a custom test case, and I probably should be able to say, like, from that custom test case, import, but add a session to a request. That's something I should be able to do. And have it essentially do these 3 steps right here. And I think I will. So I think that's a good one. That's a good note to end on, because it really will add something of value that I can use on the test suite in the future if I have to do any more direct creation of requests. We'll say add session, and it's going to take a request. And I'm going to steal this code over here and bring it to there. Whoops, I took the user line. That was not the line I wanted. So we've got now that, and the session middleware can come over here. Order that properly. So now we've got this method to add a session. We also don't need modify settings. We didn't end up using that. It didn't work. Right? Oh, it's going to fail because I don't have the session. So we'll say self add session, give it the request. So it's going to modify the request now. The test still passes. And we've killed off modify settings. So that's cool. The other thing that we can do is there's no need to like be making a request factory in a single test. Like that's pretty confusing. And the only reason I can't benefit from PyTest fixtures is because I'm choosing to use Django's or a derivative of Django's test case class, and fixtures don't. It's based on unit test, and unit test classes don't play super nicely with fixtures. So instead, what I'm going to do is add a request factory that I'll put right here. And now we have an attribute. Yeah, I mean, I'm actually am using PyTest here, and so if I had done this with just a test function, or not using test case, so here's the other way I could have done this without dealing with request factories. I could have said test no message on visit, and notice the only difference now is that it's a vanilla function, and then because PyTest would see this as a function, as a test function, it could note insert a request factory fixture. In fact, I think I could probably copy. Well, I can't because this is still using an assert from the request class, so I can't do that quickly. But you can get the idea that the body would have gone here, and the request factory would have been available to use on that fixture. But I am using this test case class because there are a lot of handy methods like assert response not contains and that kind of stuff that doesn't force me to think about where is the content in the response. It just does that automatically. So if I make my test case class have some extra features, then I get a lot of that benefit. So I need to come up here and go to the request factory and move that over to this area. And now that will work. But if I have to come back to the request factory here and just change this to, at this point, self.request factory. And that'll use the class level attribute to give me a request. I really don't even understand the request factory, why you have to like create the factory before you create request. It seems like an extra step that I never understood about Django. But the test still passes, so we're continuing to trim this down. That's the goal, is like get this down to something sensible as best we can. Like there's still some weirdness here. I don't think we need to do render anymore because I was trying to check render just to look at the content as I printed it, but the assert response not contains probably does that render, so I can delete that as well. That's going to be delayed. And what else can we move? We should move the import up to the top here and put that like so. And now that we have this down here, we can say, I'm going to delete all of this content, and we don't need the message object anywhere else except in this list. So we can delete this local variable. So that deletes another line, although I guess it wrapped, so it's not really adding much benefit there. But now we're starting to get a much clearer picture about the test, because I think the important thing that I've been staring at this and just trying to make it work for so long that it's hard to tell a story of what is the test doing. The test is setting up cookie storage for the request and any of the other little bits that are added on here. I would love to find ways to make that not a requirement, but maybe it just is. And then it's checking that the thing that we added doesn't appear in the output. It's kind of the end of the story. So I think it's a nice, simple test in the end. Relatively. It was hard fought to get there, but it ends up being relatively simple. What would I do to make this better in the future is I'd try and figure out ways to skip over a lot of this stuff. Like I would love to find a way, thank you, Stupak, I hope you learned something. I'd love to find a way to use the Django client and add a message to that client. Because the client does a lot of stuff that I take advantage of normally, like adding the user, adding the session, all of that is like buried in this one line. Like, oh, good question. Yeah, I guess you said you're not a Django person. So the Django client is it's a test. It's basically a headless browser. That's not truly accurate. So you don't actually see anything, but what it does is intended to be something that exercises all of the machinery from top to bottom for the request response lifecycle. So what you see here is it's doing a URL resolution on core start. It is running that through the view code that actually executes everything, gets a response, and in this case, there's a convenience method that is actually checking that response and making sure that the response code is a 200, which is the OK response. It cannot render JS. It's not that level of smart. Although I say that there's another client that, did I just see a middleware client? I might want to bust some heads. That's what I just saw. Middleware. Oh, okay, middleware test case. Middleware client, good. I was gonna be mad if there was like a middleware client that I could just use this whole time. That would have been super irritating. Sorry, I was getting distracted. So there is another client. It's called this live server test case. Frankly, I never use this one. I think you can, the way it works is you can integrate it with Selenium. Selenium can then talk to Chrome and do the whole bit. I've never gone this route. I don't choose to do that because I leave JavaScript testing and rendering to JavaScript tools. Like there's better tooling to check JavaScript, I think, in that ecosystem. That has been my past experience. So, but here's a good example of the client in action. So you create a client, you can do an HTTP kind of command to it. So it's posting to the login, it's giving this data, and then you can get a response back and check on the results. So what that did was exercise all of the view code, and like you didn't have to invoke it. So the difference here, the difference between this line versus this stuff is, notice that in this test, I was manually setting up the HTTP request myself. So adding all of the attributes, adding cookies and all of this stuff. All of this stuff from these lines right here would have normally come from the Django middleware. And I believe the client does that for you. So I guess the only thing that it wouldn't do is this line. And this is the whole reason that necessitated this whole long, drawn-out process is I just needed to add a message to the client, and I didn't know how to do it. So I might poke on this later and figure out if there's a cleaner way to add messages without going so low level on this, because that's really what we did, is we went really low level. Because the alternative would be find some way to add a message and then say self get request for the start view and done. That's it. That's not how this worked out though. Okay, so let's do this. Let's run all the tests, make sure everything's passing. And then I think that'll be it. Cool. And let's see what happened in the end. That's a test file. So what do we have? We have this new test that imported all this stuff from contrib messages. We imported the view. We wrote this one test, and we wrote 5 lines of, of actual code. Sigh. To actually clean up these messages, these alerts that come up from that view. But I think it did the job. Okay. I'm looking at the time. It is midnight my time, and I usually stay pretty late, but even I've been coding for 3 hours. I have no idea how to raid someone, so I would send you somewhere, but I'm not sure. This is this is the funny part. Is Al around? I don't know. So what do I do? Raid? I can raid. I don't know. I'm total noob at this. All right. Well, I will send you off then. If Al's around, have fun, Al. But it's been good chatting with y'all. Hopefully you learned something. I do take this stuff and post it up. So if there's some little bit about this, like what did he do again? This will go up on YouTube. This will be an epically long stream. I normally stream for about an hour and a half. Yeah, I've read his book. I've actually led book clubs on his book. He's a good guy. So if you're here and you want to go check him out, I recommend that. I'm gonna hit the button. I just might kick y'all out of the stream. Whatever. Have a great night. It's been good chatting with y'all. Take care.